Welcome to Recovery His Way. I'm your host, Tom Reynolds. We're on the campus here of His Way in Huntsville, Alabama. Today we have a special guest, Greg Edmonds, with us, who's graduated nearly 3 years ago. Welcome, Greg.
Thank you.
Good to have you.
Good to be here.
We've been discussing the 12 steps, and we've gone through a series for a while where we looked at how Scripture related to the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And then we've been having different guests come in and share how they've been walking through those various steps and how they've impacted them. And so I guess I'm so interested in what you get to share about that, but I certainly, for our audience and everything, I'd like for you to maybe share just a little bit about your recovery journey, kind of what's brought you to where you're at today in your walk with Christ.
Okay. Well, to start out with, a little bit about my testimony. I came through His Way, graduated in June of 2019. But before that, coming to His Way, validate my story all you want. But the truth of the matter is, I was homeless. I'd just come from jail. I was spiritually bankrupt, jobless. I didn't have a car. Materialistically speaking, that's kind of some things. But the biggest thing was spiritually bankrupt. I'd abandoned 3 kids and came to His Way and straight out of jail, basically, and wanted to change my life, and I started focusing on the solution, and the right people at the right time showed up to teach the gospel to me, and it was just the right time at the right place at the right time for me. I was able to dig in and focus on the solution, which is Jesus Christ, and start to change everything in my life. I didn't do it. I didn't wake up one day and just say I want to change everything, but God, saw fit to do that work in me, focusing on His solution, and eventually I was able to change things, focus on the big picture, and rebuild, a life, for not only me but with my kids, right, and gain custody of my 7-year-old. So
yeah, and I think maybe flesh that out a little bit more in terms of, I know you came here, and what were some of the things that you did specifically, or some of the things that maybe helped you kind of focus on kind of that rebuild?
Well, number one, I didn't get in a hurry. I stayed here for a year. I started counseling with you on a regular basis somewhere during that time. I can't remember exactly when it was, but I started applying, working the 12 steps. I dug in and did the work here that I was supposed to do. I knew that applying, I got a sponsor in AA, started working the steps, and I knew that the more I applied, my will and trying to fix things that didn't work. So, I stayed here for a year and kind of let things transform my life slowly, through the process instead of trying to change it myself. I went to a transition house after I left. Okay. And the more I focused on God and the solution, it seemed like things started to come, the jobs, the relationships, or the job, the relationship, and the material things started to take place. But I had to do the work. I had to be willing to take action.
Right. And you've been working in your job for how long now?
August 12th will be 4 years.
Okay.
At the same.
Okay, well, that's pretty good.
I started after I've been here for 2.5 months, so.
Okay.
Yeah,
right.
Been pretty good.
Okay. And I know one of the things you talk about is just things coming back together. Maybe you can detail a little more. I know you said you abandoned 3 kids. Tell us kind of how did that come back together? Kind of where are you at today in your whole family structure? Yeah. So when I got here, I abandoned 2 kids in 2013. I had when I got here, a 3-year-old son that I'd had while I was at an addiction, a girl that I'd met under very unfavorable circumstances, and I was in a bad relationship. When I got here, I always had this bad habit where I wanted to go back and fix the last relationship I'd come out of, the last thing I'd broken, So I still wanted to do that when I got here, and when I started counseling with you, immediately I wanted to go back and fix the relationship that I'd come out of and get, work on Chance, and not my other 2 kids, Noah and Zoe, that I had here in Huntsville. And so, one thing that we started to focus on was, focusing on God and working on the big picture, as opposed to just going back and making things right with Chance and
and his mother. So, you know, that changed my focus. I started paying child support. I didn't pay child support for a long time. And amazing what happens when you start doing the things you're supposed to do again. And that in turn led to a better relationship with their mother, and then with my folks, and with Noah and Zoe as well. So, and then it's like, focus on God. He takes care of the rest. So today, through that, I've got a relationship with all three kids. February 26th of 2021, I got custody of Chance, the 3-year-old. He's now 7. And then it's like getting a sponsor and being willing to surround yourself with all the people that are willing to encourage you. I'm recently, in the last 2 years, I've gotten married too. So the woman that God put in my life is an amazing woman of God that's has a nonprofit, the Place of Grace, that we're working on now to build a facility to house women. So
right.
She has the same hopes and aspirations I do, chasing Jesus.
Right. Yeah, that's a great picture, because I know when I talk to a lot of guys, kind of similar to what you're saying, is I think a lot of us get really micro-focused on fixing this one thing. Either I need to get a woman in my life, or I need to get this taken care of, I need to fix this one thing, and that kind of stuff, instead of really pursuing God and letting God kind of bring life alongside of us and things merging into our lives. And I know that's what you and Jocelyn, your current wife, kind of did. I mean, you're both chasing God and happen to find common bonds with each other in that pursuit.
Right.
And so then it kind of works together naturally, where you're not each other's focal point, but God's the focal point for both of you. So that's a beautiful picture and a great way to put together a relationship in the future.
Not always perfect, but
I understand. No, that's true true in my life as well. Well, we've been talking about these steps. We've talked about the first 6 steps so far. And I know you've been active in AA and have remained active in AA during all this time. And the first 3 steps really focus on kind of reconciling our relationship with God. And then really the next few steps begin to really think about getting a peace within myself. I mean, just kind of getting that relationship with God established, and then kind of absorbing that relationship into my own character, my personality, and those kind of things. And so this 7th step is, humbly and asking God to remove all these defects of character, these shortcomings. And so I'm interested in kind of, as you've worked the steps, how this 7th step, how you've worked it, how has it impacted this whole journey you've been a part of?
Right. It's when we first started talking about this, I was like, well, I'm not real familiar with step 7, because oftentimes, the big book only lends, a couple, big book of Alcoholics Anonymous only lends a couple sentences to step 6 and 7. But it's also, it's one thing, it's a lot about, step 7 is a lot about humility, humbly asking him to remove our shortcomings. And I think as all the steps are, you got to work the steps one after another. You don't just jump to step 7 or whatever. But it's interesting how step 7 coincides with steps 4, 5, 6, and 7. You're working on your defects of character and your shortcomings, and I think once you've identified those things that block you off from God, your character defects in step 4 and 5, and shared them with somebody else, that's humbling. And so I've always just moved through them and said a couple of prayers and gone on. But when you truly work, you come to the program, or you're willing to get sober and to do, that willingness is huge. The big book says it's indispensable. When you're willing to sincerely work on those character defects and want to change everything about you, then, and you share that with somebody else, there's a certain amount of humility that's set in, and so from that, our godly sorrow also, when you're truly willing to do that. So I think when you come to God in prayer, for those things, I think they don't just change overnight. And there's some that you want to hold on to, and there's been many that I've wanted to hold on to, but you slowly but surely let go of them, and I think one thing is that, you identify the character defects like selfishness and self-centeredness, or dishonesty. You try to apply the opposite of that in your life too. So that's, step 7 is the key to letting those go and letting God handle them.
I know you've had a sponsor through all of this. Has the sponsor been important in dealing with a step like 7? Do they help with that?
Yeah.
And how so?
Definitely, because, I talk to my sponsor every single day, and, I don't make I still don't make any major decisions without talking to him. And I'm terrible about worrying, and so I've got to constantly be applying, transparency and honesty in my life. I've got to keep him abreast of everything that goes on in my, and you as well. I meet with you every other Friday, and to keep you abreast of everything that's going on in my life. Not only, taking captive of my thoughts and sharing those with people, but he has been very instrumental in keeping me there, because, I share with him things, that go on in my life on a daily basis. Try to line it up with what God would have me do, and so he kind of brings that humility in play there, so that I can release some stuff.
I think it's interesting because humility is an interesting concept, because I think we all admire humility, we all applaud humility, but we don't really know what are the steps to pursue humility. Humility is a weird thing to have to pursue, and I think you've pointed out a couple of things I just want to kind of highlight in terms of this process. So one, just being open and honest. I mean, that's step 5 of opening up and really sharing all this moral inventory is a humiliating process and demands a lot of humility, right?
Right.
And then continuing to walk that step out. I mean, it's not just, okay, I did that once, now I'm done, but because now I've identified those shortcomings, now I got to kind of spend more time with them, develop those things, and begin to focus more on those things. It's not just, made me a list, now tear it up, throw it away, and let's pretend that, I'm glad that's over with. But it's really now walking in that, and so it becomes an increase in humility. You mentioned prayer. Prayer's important, surrendering myself to somebody else, having a sponsor, being accountable to somebody. All are steps that actively pursue humility. I think we would like just to kind of pray a prayer for humility and snap, I'm just going to be humble, and that's the way it's going to be, right? But you're talking about actually pursuing some very specific steps that continue to develop, pursue, and ingrain humility, where I'm not making major decisions without the input of advisors and kind of stuff, is a humbling position to choose. I mean, because most people want to be, do their own thing. I'm smart enough to handle this myself, that kind of thing. So how do you kind of work in those things? So how do you continue to pursue that attitude? How do you not, at some point, just kind of draw a line and say, okay, enough of that. I'm ready to, I feel like, I need to take the training wheels off and kind of get on the big boy bike and kind of do it myself now.
Yeah. Well, I think number one, I mean, however you want to look at it, I look at it the fact that I've been very blessed, lucky, or whatever to have made the mistakes and lived through them like I have, I guess, so that I can recognize the pain today, at least. I'm not guaranteed tomorrow, but today I can recognize the pain. It's not about the drugs and alcohol, they say, are just a symptom. So it's the underlying cause that I want to get to. And so the root cause of what's going on, I recognize the pain, I'm depressive by nature if I'm not careful. I'm selfish and self-centered. I want things my way. I'm overly competitive. So all these characteristics, the character defects, cause pain today that I know that if I continue down that road, it's gonna lead me back to wanting to take a drink or a drug, so that's been my history. So today, through my experience, I know when I start to reach that pain threshold, when I'm headed in the wrong direction. So I'm either willing to take action and get in a solution, God's solution, and be transparent with a sponsor, with you or other people that are in my life today, and do something different and, accept feedback and take action on it or not. So, pain is the best indicator.
Right. And, one of the things it says in this step here is to humbly ask God to remove these shortcomings, right? So it's not that I'm going to take an action to remove them. I'm asking God to do it. So prayer becomes a critical part. Maybe share with us a little bit how prayer has been an important part of this process for you, and how prayer is related to this pursuit of humility.
Right. So, before I got here in 2018, I was in jail, and I think I heard Rex share about his experiences in prison, in a very bad. I was in, not as long, but I was in jail under the very, very similar circumstances. And man, the only way to kind of keep my wits and stay positive were to number one, pray. I'd lost everything. I was homeless, jobless, and so and to keep my nose in the Bible, and let the Holy Spirit to go to work on me. But prayer became very integral. I didn't have a family. I didn't have a relationship with God. I didn't have a home. I didn't have these things. So it became evident to me that I was to submit to God, and He would provide all these things, but only by focusing on Him. So I started praying in jail, and it continued when I got here. I hit my knees every morning, and I started thanking God for the home I have, for the job I have, for my sobriety, for my family, and all the things I didn't have, and I still thank Him today for those things.
So you were in early on. You were thanking God for these things that you don't have.
Correct. Yeah.
What does that mean? I don't understand what that means.
Well, I knew that I just knew that He would put them back in my life, and I knew that He was going to be the one that was going to give them to me, and it wasn't going to be me doing it on my own will. It was going to be me focusing on God and the people He put in my life. His way was put in my life. I knew that there, I had to submit to Him, that He would, by doing the work, suiting up, showing up, and doing the work, that He would restore my life and
about everything you prayed for has happened, hasn't it?
That's correct. Yeah,
that's amazing.
It has. Yeah. So I continue along that path today, but just that act of hitting my knees and thanking Him for those things, and that we tend to take for granted. The act of hitting your knees is humbling yourself. I've humiliated myself enough. It's not humiliation, today. It's the words are, it's humbleness, and I take it with me, in prayer, and not only thanking Him for those things, but I go on and pray for others, and I pray for the ability to seek Him in all that I do, and to be obedient to what I find in my search for Him. So, that's a kind of an act of humility, And so,
I know we've prayed together a lot, and that's I don't think I've ever heard you pray that you don't mention that phrase that you just mentioned. I mean, there's this, I know you got some key ideas that are always a part of your prayer, whatever you're praying about. What you just said something about discovering those things and then being willing to follow that. Maybe what do you mean by that? I mean, you pray about that a lot.
Well, yeah, as I just try to keep it, if nothing else, it's like it has to become second nature to me, and I don't understand prayer, never will. I don't understand humility totally. And it's one of those things that when you think you have it, you don't, they say,
Right.
And I don't know if I ever want to fully understand it, but to keep it in the forefront of my mind, praying for the ability to search for God, the strength, to have the strength, power, and knowledge to search for God in all that I do, just the best of my ability, and then to be obedient to what I find in my search for Him. I've got that keeps it in the forefront of my mind, so that through the day, I recognize things throughout the day. Prayer and meditation become important, and applying certain things in your life, on a daily basis.
I love the idea there. It's one thing to be seeking after God. It's another thing to be obedient to the things I find. It's a power to me. Every time I hear you pray that, it's always a powerful conviction and a part of that humility. That as I discover things, it's not a matter of just having an intellectual affirmation. I have this great insight now. But what am I going to do to humbly now submit myself to that new insight or that new realization, whatever that may be? That's really that ongoing process of humility, right? Because that's the hard thing, is how do you grow in humility? I think all of us go through humbling times in our lives, but most of us try to figure out ways out of it. Mm-hmm. How do you pursue the other and really pursue, deepening that humility, which is the things that your prayer seems to have embedded within, which I really appreciate. I know that, in one of the typical things in AA is the serenity prayer. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. How does that fit into kind of your growth in this step, or your humility? How does that idea, at least, I don't know if that's a prayer you would pray, but that idea, how does that get captured in your process?
You I've been to a lot of AA meetings, and it's always AA meetings are always opened up with the serenity prayer, and you go through the motions to say it all the time without even giving a thought really of what you're saying, you know. But it's only when you focus on it. And I can't say that for the longest time that I ever tried to apply it, but you know, there's only certain things that I can't control in this world. I tell you what, you know, when applying it to the 7th step, you know, it's like I can control what I can control, and you know, I can and do the best I can and leave the results up to God, you know, and He is when I have focused on my attitude, my actions, and on God. You know, I don't always get what I want, but it's amazing how things always kind of tend to work out, you know, and when it comes to the 7th step, you know, I can kind of relate it. I was thinking before I came over here, I'd been at His way for 8 or 9 months, maybe a year. And you know, I still, one of the most embarrassing things about my past was I'd shoplift to support my habit, but I got a thrill out of that, you know, and I would still do that a year into sobriety. You know, not all the time, but I would still, you know, I was cash register honest, but I would go in and steal a candy bar to get a thrill out of it, you know, or toothpaste, or, you know, something, and not to save money. I'd have a pocket full of money, but that's embarrassing to me, you know. But I got to a point where I was like, you know, how can I live a life sober and continue to carry these things with me, or be a father to my son? So, you know, the thing I could control there was, hey, look, if I want to change this, I've got to share this with somebody, you know. And so I shared it with my sponsor, Keith, and it lost its power over me, you know. And we prayed about it and moved on, and it hasn't been an issue since. But you know, I I control my actions today, you know, and as long as I put the right foot forward and try to do better, and you know, He'll remove those from me, but I got to do my part.
Right. I think that's the powerful thing about this, right? Is that we're asking, the humility is, I can't remove these shortcomings myself, right? I am asking God to remove those things. You know, God can do for us what we cannot do for ourselves, kind of idea. And, you know, you hit the 7th step in the step process, and you hit that. But as you're kind of indicating here, not just a one-time deal. You don't just do this once and you're in one and done kind of deal. It's an ongoing thing. I know in the 11th step, which we haven't got to yet, you know, it talks about continue growing in this conscious contact with God and that kind of stuff, and continuing to have an ongoing, growing relationship. As you look both where you're at today and into the future, where do you see yourself growing? I mean, what do you see yourself growing toward? What kind of things do you look forward to?
I think the biggest area that I want to grow in is becoming more useful to others. You know, God has performed a work in my life, and I mean, is it perfect all the time? I wake up on the wrong side of the bed just like anybody else, but I want to be able to get to the point where, you know, I can pass on what I have today to somebody else, and not come across as being judgmental or you know, at all. I just want to be, you know, I want to learn to be as unselfish as I can possibly be, and be of the you know, most use I can to God and to other people in my life, to be an encourager, you know. Right. That's my ultimate goal, to lead people down that path.
And I know you and your wife coming together in the last couple of years, you have a endeavor that you're pursuing. I'd like maybe to talk about that for just a second, because that kind of relates to that very picture. Right. What are you guys pursuing? Tell me about that.
Well, my wife started the Place of Grace. Jocelyn, my wife, she comes from the same background I did, so she's been sober for about 10 years now, and she never met anybody like her. The heart that she has of service to others, she kind of overdoes it sometimes, I think, but she started the Place of Grace, a nonprofit to help women in addiction and homelessness. Kind of been through the same thing that she went through. What she does is, you know, raises money for the Place of Grace, and then she's used her own money and own funds to find ways to get people into treatment. She bends over backwards and does anything she can to open doors to get them into treatment. She transports them there, provides hygiene products, clothes. I mean, the list goes on, and so that's grown exponentially for her. So now, together, we speak together, raise money. And also, ultimately, the goal is we just recently broken ground on the Place of Grace, a facility to house up to 40 women over in Hackleburg.
Okay.
So
you're
still in the process of raising money
Right.
to go there and putting that together. We've got a wonderful team in place, and things are really looking up.
That's exciting. So, so you're not just dreaming about the idea or just reflecting on the nice idea of maybe helping people, but you're actually putting some muscle behind the idea that you're actually doing something toward that end. And I know Jocelyn's been doing this longer than you, but you're joining her in that, and you guys are pursuing that together, which I think is a beautiful picture of what a relationship and a marriage can really do to reflect the character of Christ.
Yes.
So that's great.
Actually moving dirt. That's right. Yeah.
That's great. Well, Greg, I appreciate you being with us today and sharing more about the step 7, understanding how to walk in it, how to grow in humility. I know our relationship, I've just been blessed to be a part of this journey with you, and to see your humility and to see your growth and to see every time we always get together, you always have an eager spirit to see what's the next thing that God's teaching me here and how can I be obedient to that pursuit. So I continue to see that humility growing in you, and I know you can't see it, and if you did, you wouldn't be humble anymore.
That's right.
So it's good that you can.
Thank you.
And I'm proud of you. I'm excited about our future together. And I'm thankful for you sharing with all of our guests today. So thank you.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for listening and watching to Recovery His Way. If you'd like to learn more about our program and our podcast, you can check us out at hiswayinc.org.